But now get to our main topic here on Mastering Dungeons this week. We will continue our tour of Planescape, Sigil, and the Outlands. We've talked Sigil, we've talked the factions and the city wards, and now we are going to get to the Outlands portion of Sigil and the Outlands. And, well, the Outlands are out there. They are a plane of concordant opposition, a disc-shaped plane of perfect neutrality at the center of the outer planes. This is just as Sigil is sort of a crossroads, so are the Outlands, only in really more ways than one, because each of these gate towns that make up the Outlands have a gate to their parallel plane out there in the outer planes. So we will today cover all of chapter 3. We're going to do it. We're going to get through it. We're going to get through it all. Yep. And we're going to talk about what this is, how to use it, why it's great for your game, why it may be confusing for your game, how you can use it as a DM, etc.
Shawn,
I'm going to take a drink.
Yeah, I'm going to start with almost a look back a bit, because I got my paper copy of this book, which lets me really appreciate that art and the layout. So I've been reading it on D&D Beyond, and it was really interesting to me to see, like, I might think there was a certain amount of words on a page reading it in D&D Beyond, and then, like, for example, I'd look at the factions section, and I'm holding it up for those who can see it, and each faction is on a half a page, one column. And when I was reading it, it makes so much more sense, and it's so much easier for me to compare it. And I found myself actually rereading sections of the book that I'd already read, because it was so much more enjoyable to do so in print, and made so much more sense once you have the layout there. So, like, the factions, are a quarter page, and then if I look at, like, the wards we talked about, well, each of those is a page spread or two, but no, it's more of that. I take that back. But a page spread or two. But with these kinds of, the way it's laid out on the page really changed my feeling for it and my enjoyment of this book, which I already liked, but I like it a lot more now that I've held it physically, if that makes sense. And it made me kind of think back. This is kind of my second point, Shawn, then I'll shut up. But we last time talked about sort of high level what it does in reviewing the wards, and we're going to try to high level talk about the Outlands too. But it's worth saying that there are some really neat locations that we didn't cover last time. The places like the grease pit, like all the food places in the hive that are interesting. And so I wouldn't want a listener of our review, either in this session or last episode, to think that that you don't get really neat scenes and ideas to bring the city or the Outlands to life. You do. It may feel a little thin at some point, but I mean the page count is what it is. But there are some really fun ideas in these, and some very cinematic, kind of amazing concepts in play here. And so we'll try to talk those when it comes to the Outlands in this session. But I want to make those points.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think I'm going to wait till the end to say what I was going to say, but it's sort of yours is a precursor to what I was going to say. So we'll go through this here. So we get a brief-ish section on just the overall Outlands themselves. And the first point that is made is, this is the disc-shaped plane at the center of this wheel. And so everything that you would see in Sigil, you might also see here. It's just not a city. It's more a crossroads, but with separate sections of these gate towns in each. Yeah. And it says, under cosmic realignment, save for the domains of the gods, the realms in the Outlands are subject to a planar phenomenon known as the cosmic realignment. What does that mean? When a location embodies the nature of one of the outer planes too closely, that plane absorbs the location and its inhabitants, restoring balance to the outlands and expanding that outer plane. So,
Mm.
right, the very first thing we learn about this place is if it becomes too much like its home plane, it gets pulled into that and balance is restored.
Yeah.
But it talks about save for the domains of gods. And we were asking that question before, is Sigil, are the rules that govern Sigil the same governing the Outlands, in that godlike entities, powerful beings of that scale can't come in? And I still don't know the answer, but save for the domains of gods makes me think that it does not uh hold to those same things. But it talks about the domain of the gods, not the gods themselves. So I'm still confused.
I mean, and that is a thing that I think Planescape has always struggled with. Like, the sort of what is this product and what is the experience, because in sort of before this, when you worked off of the old manual of the Planes book, or if you start with, say, the Dungeon Master's Guide in 5th edition, your thought is sort of like, hey, I'm going to go to the Nine Hells, as we did in Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus.
Mhm.
And one of the ways you could do that is by somehow getting a portal to Sigil, and from Sigil going through the Outlands and then going through the gate town that leads you there. That is a way you can do it, but you probably will just go to it directly. So, okay, now we have the city, where in the city you could have devils roaming around and a bar that feels like it's in the Nine Hells. You could also go to the gate town that leads to that and experience that. And it's hard to know exactly why you would do, like, what you would do when and why. It gets a little confusing in my DM brain, at least,
Yeah.
to sort that out.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming down on this. It's just talking about the cosmic realignment. Okay, I'm going to jump
Mm-hmm.
to the end. Just about this cosmic realignment. I'm a DM. I love this. I love the strangeness of it. I love how it's different than anything else I've ever run. I love the idea of telling a story in this setting, not just like one gate town, but all the gate towns, not just in Sigil, but throughout the breadth of Sigil. But if there's always this cosmic realignment, then what is my point? What is
Mm.
the ultimate goal of my character if balance is just going to be restored no matter what I do?
Mm.
And not only that, but what are the goals of the main players in each of these places?
Mm.
And what are the goals of just the common shopkeeper worker in these places? Because unless I know that, it's hard to put a character, put a player character into the setting and sort of answer those questions for them, those basic questions of why am I saving people from this place that's attached to Hades? Why am I fighting against the people who are attached to this goody good, super lawful place? And I never quite, I can make it up, but it always seems like the choice I make ends up going against the actual content of the book at some point. So I'm trying to juggle all of these things to get my game master brain around
Yeah.
where this everything is leading.
Yeah, and my experience is often colored by what we read when we did our episodes where we talked about the Great Modron March, which is this classic adventure. You know, you follow the sort of march of the Modrons over a span of several months, if not years, and you go to a bunch of different gate towns and sort of experience them, and sometimes the planes themselves, and it, it's hard to make those scenes resonate well. Like, most of that product, I would say, kind of is more on the side of failing to provide a great feel for the locations rather than managing to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like you could make, like you said before, about there are many great locations that we didn't cover within the wards,
Hmm.
and there are going to be great locations that we don't cover in the Outlands. And they are great, and they would be super fun to run an encounter in. But to make them just a backdrop rather than a living, breathing part of the story
Hmm.
seems wrong, right? It seems like, oh, you need to go to all 16 gate towns and pull one item from each in order to make the thing that stops Asmodeus from taking over the multiverse. Great. But every time I go into one of these gate towns, I'm going to feel something, but that something isn't part of the story, right? I go
Hmm.
into the Hades gate town to get the item, and I see all these people who are oppressed and depressed
Hmm.
and looking for, and I want to spend the time there to fix their problems.
Yeah,
And
and you
just to
can't.
go in and out, right? You
Well,
can't,
and
but the setting
that's
says you can't.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's an interesting part as well here. That it's sort of when you look at one of these gate towns, does it take too much away from the experience of the plane beyond, or does it even make you not want to go to the plane beyond? And I found myself feeling that maybe I feel that the gate towns are a little too strong in what they portray, and we'll talk through some examples, such that I don't know that I want to go to that place anymore.
Mhm.
And that maybe it fails to honor the fiction of the ideal that the planes are supposed to serve, when this version sort of is less of a promise and more of a delivery, and feels kind of like a window into the place in a way that I don't want it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I have a similar
Okay.
thought. So we'll go
Yeah.
through that as we go through each
Yeah.
gate town. A few other of the more generic parts about the Outlands: currency and trade. Bartering is the most common way to purchase goods. There is something called a lodestar, which is a coin stamped with a five-pointed star, which is made in Tradegate, one of the gate towns, and it's generally and conveniently worth one gold piece. So, right. So if you do need coin, you can probably for one gold piece buy one gold, one lodestar, and then you can. And
And
I feel like there's like a whole story behind that I
yeah.
never see.
I think the part that I like is this first part of Barden being most common, and that in general, if you're in this fantastic world, do you really want a gold piece or even this lodestar? No, I mean, yes, currencies and exchange, mediums of exchange are necessary and efficient, but also like it's not about just wealth. And so I think that's a neat way to look at it, almost like when you're dealing with things in like the Feywild, right? Like it's probably not about giving a sack of gold to these pixies. It's about entertaining them and dealing with them in those ways. And I think that's kind of the coolest aspect of it that I'd look at.
For sure. How do you get over the language barrier? Well, luckily, common is commonly spoken, although certain areas of concentrated folk may revert to the language that they all know. So if you have a large coterie of demons, then they will probably speak abyssal as well as common. What's religion like here? The Outlands contain the domains of several gods, such as the hidden tower of Anam, the Allfather, creator of the giants, and the gaseous realm of the beholder god Zimnid. Devout worshippers, whether alive or dead, gravitate to their gods and carry out their will. This confused me more than anything. It's like, so all the talk we've had about gods before, are there actual gods there in the Outlands, or are
Hmm.
they? Oh, apparently they are.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's the
yeah.
weird thing is Sigil, you can see Sigil hovering above the spire, but you can't
Mhm.
get to it. You can't possibly fly to it or reach it. So it's almost artificially shown there and depicted there, but it isn't
Yeah.
truly there or it isn't accessible. So yeah, but for sure there are gods in these lands. And that's one of the other interesting things about this book, which I think it has to do due to size, because the Outlands is, pages 61 to 96. And
Mhm.
in those 35 pages, they have to cover a lot. And so you basically get, a 2-page spread for each gate town.
Mhm.
And then you have a very quick session of other stuff, as we'll talk about. And the other stuff is the reality is that if you think of it as and there's a simple map in one place and then a detailed map included in your book, which I have no idea how to easily find it on D&D Beyond. It kind of drove me mad, and then I just gave up. I'm sure it's somewhere there, but I could not find how to get the fold out map easily.
Yep.
Anyway, but the idea of, you imagine a pizza, and in the center, instead of the little plastic table that keeps the box from sticking, is the spire and Sigil hovering above it. And on the outer edges of the pizza are the gate towns. Imagine like where the slices come together, and those are the gate towns. But then there's and around them is sort of an area that reflects the gate town. But eventually that dies down and melds into what are the other areas are. But in the spaces in between, all sorts of stuff is there, and we just get a few windows into the stuff. And
Mhm.
as usual with this kind of Planescape thing, the idea is, well, the DM can decide how big this is and what leads to where. We're not telling you.
Mhm. Yeah. The last little bit before we get to the gate towns is there are no suns, moons, or stars, but we have 12-hour cycles of day and night called peak and anti-peak. And then the directions are based on whether you're moving toward the spire or away from the spire. Toward the spire is spireward, and away from the spire is brinkward. And the poster map where talked about again, where it says the map is what it is, things change. We can't be too detailed. And there's a common saying, apparently, which is it takes as long as it takes when talking about how long it takes to get from one place to another, which is exactly what the DM will probably be saying or thinking as they create their adventures in this area. So let's
And
talk about the gate
I
towns.
did just find the poster map, Shawn. There is a
Yeah.
poster map section in the book, and that's where it links. So beginning of chapter 3 is where you'll find it. And it is gorgeous. It's beautiful. It looks like something kind of like you'd find at the Vatican on a wall or something like that.
Right.
It really is great. I love the style of it,
Yeah.
and definitely a lot there for the DM to be creative with.
Yep. So let's talk about the gate towns. There are 16 of them, one for each outer plane. We are given them alphabetically, starting with Automata, which is the gate town leading to the clockwork nirvana of Mechanus. Who are the primary citizens? Modrons. Modrons are the inhabitants of Mechanus and of this gate town as well. What are we looking at for the flavor of this gate town, Teos?
Yeah, each of these has a strong sort of presence, and here the idea is clocks and annoyingly lawful. That's those are the
Mhm.
fate traits I would assign. Everything runs on time to a particular rhythm, and it's lawful annoying. If you the way you might start typically think of a paladin, um, there is a rhythm to the place. So anything that is rhythmic, like a bird chirping, a hammer hitting the anvil, ends up matching the ticking of the gear that revolves around the gate to Mechanus, and so that's kind of a fun thing, and probably really annoying to chaotic characters. But then there's also this strange lawful evil underground known as the inverse, and they kind of underground somehow nobody knows they're there. Like it makes it clear that people don't know that they're there, and they like make a mockery of all the laws, but are lawful. That part was weird for me.
Yeah, a little bit. Next, we have Bedlam, which is the gate to Pandemonium. Its citizens are primarily humanoids, such as runaways and outlaws, eking out a miserable existence. The gate itself comes out of an obsidian tower called Sable Reach, where winds tear at the town and cause a constant decay, deafening anyone within 1,000 feet of the tower. And the wind causes a psychic spite in people and can even dominate people to commit evil acts.
Yeah, and this is like what you were talking about, where it's like if you arrive in Bedlam and you're a good character, you might want to help people, but there's no real helping them. I think there is that sense that an endless number of runaways and outlaws will find their way here and will be miserable because that's just how it is. And you can't really do anything because this evil presence is just coming out, literally blasting out both psychically and physically out of the gate. And it's just going to be this way. So, yeah, and there are some adventure places, like there's the Iron Dagger, a tavern that has silence cast within, but like completely silent. So then it's rife with crime because people can sneak up on you. And then there's the Wailing Hollows, tunnels worn by the winds, where miners search for this black ore that fumes with malice. And it's just, yeah, there's a sense of like, well, I guess these are places to visit, but you got to keep going because you can't really accomplish anything here. And keep going to where? Because if I come to Bedlam, like we were saying before, do I really want to go to Pandemonium where it's going to be even worse? Like, boy, I better have one heck of an adventure reason to do that because and even Automata, if I'm a chaotic character and I'm there, I might want to change things, but I can't really.
Right. I think we're going to see, we've just seen, and we are going to continue to see sort of what is the reason for us to be here. And you can give an outside reason, but it's just a get in, get out, and really don't associate with this. What I would do if I was going to run the kind of campaign that I want to is to give each of these place, as you've been saying, it's sort of a little too much.
Mhm.
I would try to tone down the weirdness and make each one more of a normal city, more of a normal area where something important is done, something important is made. The people have a reason for staying there. Because if I ended up in Bedlam and it was horrible, I would just walk away.
Yeah.
And they don't seem to give a reason why people stay in any of these places that are horrible. When you
And
just
they're
over
all kind of
there,
horrible.
yeah, well, they're all horrible in their own way, yeah. Um, and maybe that's the point, right? But I would try to make them less horrible
Mhm.
and give the people, in some of the places they're trying to revolt or they're trying to,
Mhm.
there's always that counterculture, whether it's an evil place with good people trying to overthrow a tyrant or a good place with an evil, seedy underbelly. That's also sort of noble in its own right in some cases, trying to do something better than what it's seeing. But it's just this mishmash right
Yeah.
now, and I don't feel like you just walk into the city and exist for any amount of time. It's a little
Yeah.
overwhelming. For maybe it should be, but I don't think it fits into campaigns well that way.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to that question we had earlier in our listener question segment, where it was are we being unfair as critics? How should it serve the DM and the players and so on? And maybe if this were totally toned down, we'd say, well, what's the point? This is too obvious. Isn't this supposed to be like a rich planar experience? But it's hard, right? It's hard to do
Mhm.
this. What it does, I think it does it exceedingly well. Like the words are great, the
Mhm.
visuals are clear, like in just 2 pages. I mean, if you think of the task of writing, you must cover the gate town in just these 2 pages.
Mhm.
Like that is hard, right? And
Mhm.
really good work is done here. And it's just the whole what do you want out of this as a DM and as a play experience? And it might really vary. But I tend to agree with you that personally for me, I if I think of it, if I hate this place, like if I am anti chaotic type stuff or anti evil, then not having any real agency ground here is sort of
Mhm.
difficult to enjoy. And at the same time, if I love this thing, the fact that it's shown to be so bad, like let's talk about there's Curse, the Tartarian Depths of Carcery, which is all like a prison town. And
Mhm.
like it's just like I don't even know kind of why you're saying, like, why don't you leave? It's so bad here. And here they say you actually can't leave. They keep you
Right.
from exiting. So at least there's a reason. No one wants to let you leave. And then at the same time, there's the gate in the center of town. No one's apparently ever come out of it, because in the prison plane of Carcery, I guess you never escape into this gate town. So maybe it's
Right.
even just a one-way gate. Um, and like, sort of, what do you really do with that as a DM? Or ecstasy, which is tied to Elysium. And when we think about Elysium classically through D&D, the idea is that this should be like a wonderful place, right? And the streets are filled with cardinals and humanoids. It's serene rolling hills. It's a pastoral gate town. But there is a pacifying aura that comes out within 300 feet of the gate and suppresses negativity. And it basically is like a Star Trek episode where everybody looks happy, but actually internally it says, quote, walking powder kegs of bitterness, bottling their feelings until they erupt in unbridled incidents. And that's great in the sort of Star Trek way. But also, like, man, if my God is in Elysium, I would be like, why is this the case? Like, I don't like this. And I'm supposed to like this. This is supposed to be the promised land, or the gateway to the promised land. It's maybe a
Mhm.
little too heavy in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, if you tone it down just a scooch and you give people a reason to come into or out of this place, and give the people a task to work toward,
Mm-hmm.
then the characters can come in and either help in that task or disrupt the task in addition to meeting their own goals for the story. It just
Yeah.
But hanging over all of this is this idea of neutrality. So it doesn't matter what you do, right? If you make it,
Yeah.
too much, then it goes away. If you make it too little, then somewhere else something changes to balance it out. It's hard to wrap my mind around.
Yeah, and I mean, and the product, because the D&D is not a movie, it's a pro usually not a movie. It's a product for DMs. I feel like the DMs deserve the explanation, right? And so, like, if this were the Matrix, the role playing game, you'd want to explain to the DM why periodically the world resets and is rebooted, and break that
Mhm.
down to people. And I think in that same way, why these things sort of reset, and the balances, and what to do with it, how to work with that, I think could use would be of value to understand how to do it. Or if the idea is, look, man, this just doesn't work. It's it is for you to just drop in and move in and out, and keep them going, because
Yeah.
you know one thing that's neat, Shawn, the gate town of Faunel,
Mhm.
which leads to the Beastlands, is pretty cool because of what it does compared to other places, where this one is an example of what happens when the gate town gets pulled in through the gate and you start
Mhm.
over.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this idea of the citizens being these awakened beasts, and it's just a massive hunt constantly, hunt or be hunted. um Now that I can get into, right,
Yeah.
that makes sense to me in terms of an adventure where you have to go in and rescue someone, and you get the idea of what's happening.
And there
uh
are three factions that are guiding huge packs of
mhm,
beasts, and no leader has yet been chosen to lead New Faunel, since Old Faunel broke down. And you have a Nullfang of Yenogu who heads up the Vile Hunt, hunting beasts. And this actually has action, right? And then there's this great visual of a stone colossus named Wrath, who sits by the pool to the Beastlands and asks you what your intent is, right? And are you going beyond to hunt, because that's not okay? And this one really, like, I was like, oh yeah, here I can see what I would do with this, right?
mhm.
And
Yep.
there's
And
agency to be had, although
yeah,
not
and
long term.
for me, Fortitude, the next one is similar. It's the gate to the peaceable kingdoms of Arcadia, home to celestials and humanoids, where everything is about symmetry and beauty. And the quote is a pressure chamber of homogeneous moral rectitude, which I love. And that's something, again, you could go into. You need to get information from someone who breaks this beauty, and they're being punished for doing so. and you could sort of, you have to work your way through the society in order to find out where this person is, and that's the goal that you can see yourself in.
Mm.
And you don't have to change everything, but you have to sort of weave your way through to get to your goal.
Yeah, and we should say that every section, every gate town has a like tiny block of encounters, like a little table, like Fortitude has D4 adventure hooks. But they tend to be things like a local politician, dwarf noble, pays the characters to dig up dirt on an opponent, that are, fine little side trekky things, but they're seldom really like a good meaty thing that I can do here. And I would have liked that, like what you're talking about, that it would be a little more things like how to operate the gate, like what it usually takes to get access to the gate, and what does it take to make it here, and how to create an experience out of this. I would have liked 2 paragraphs rather than these tables.
Yeah. What I'm hoping in the long run is when we get to the adventure at the end of this, the adventure will be a good blueprint for how to run a campaign and use all of this content to its utmost potential. And we'll see if that happens. To quickly run down through some of the other gate towns, we have Glorium, the gate to the heroic domains of Isgard, where giants and humanoids fight to seek glory. Hopeless, the gate to Hades, with undead demons and oozes burbling forth from the gate, citizens being humanoids and beholders. The enigmatic High Cardinal Thingol is the ruler backed by these beholders. And in Hopeless, misery does not really love company, but misery does love the color gray. So if you go back to Greek myth, in Hades, that's what it, it's not a hell in the sense of you're burning in hellfire. You're just there. You just barely exist. So that's the feel there. Plague Mort, the gate to the abyss, where the citizens are demons and humanoids, and everyone is just like in the abyss, working to knock off the person in front of them so they can become the leader. No one should ever be trusted, and it's just mass chaos and death. And any other ones catch your eye?
I mean, there are so many. Yeah, I think I've mentioned the ones that were my favorites, but we've got Ribcage, Rigus, Sylvania, the Sylvania with the non-stop party. It reminds me of there's that great picture of like a satyr and other fae kind of partying that came out in the Theros guide, and I imagine that just could go right here. But it's also has this like vampire angle too, right?
There is a vampire.
Yeah.
One of the encounters is a vampire hires you to pick their next mate.
Yeah.
Because like everyone comes together and it's a party, but there's also some really nasty things happening in the background if you're not careful. So you have to, but you just want a party, so you have to sort of fight off those urges in order not to be completely surprised when something bad happens to you.
The art throughout all of it is just, I mean, incredible. Like all of the like this is torch that leads to Gehenna. I mean, just incredible art that really every single gate town gets art showing what it's like. The Chaos Zeos is really neat, that leads to Limbo as well. And there's this great art of 3 mode runs that are preparing to like try to go through the gate, and really neat. And then we get to this sort of other section, right, Shawn?
Yeah. So the other section is outside of the gate towns are all manner of other interesting places and features, like walking castles, layers of timeless evils, godly realms. And so places where you, if you're not in a gate town, can go explore, can have encounters, can set your stories, and so on. But I mean, the list is very long, and there, like we said before, with the wards, some really, really cool places here. So you might have to build a story to go with them, but the grist is there for your storytelling mill if you want to take the time to mill it.
Yeah, I'll quickly mention a couple that caught my eye. Dendratus, a vertical city of towers and bridges across a fissure. And this is a sacred site for creatures known as Romani, which are detailed in the monster book. And this lattice of towers and bridges covers a massive body, and no outsider knows what that body is. Like, what is this thing that's there, right? That's neat. The hidden realm where Anam, the All-Father, came after leaving his giant children. So if you know Storm King's Thunder and the story there, that's, he's here. Or Ubtao, if you've played the Cholt adventure and you know how Ubtao has sort of like stepped back from life in Cholt while also still guarding against Dendar the Night Serpent. Well, he's here in the labyrinth of life, dwelling as a T-Rex, storming through this jungle labyrinth. There's just great. I mean, what a playground of ideas this is. You just have to figure out how to make use of it, and any one of these concepts we're talking about is just a paragraph, or so. A paragraph or two for each one of them, right? And then you get like 3 pages of this stuff. So it's very dense. Great, awesome ideas, but the lifting is for you.
There you go. So we've been to Sigil. We have seen the Outlands. Now we are ready to move away from the first book and into the others. The next book is a monster book, so we will delve into that. We don't know how deep we're going to delve into them because monster books are a series of monsters. Sometimes, rather than going through monsters one by one, we may skim it, and we may move directly into the next or the adventure that is sent along with this content. I think it's called Turn of Fortune's Wheel. So we will see what we talk about next time, but it will likely be back here covering Planescape. Any words of wisdom before we take off, Teos?
No, I mean, I will say, we critique what we see here, but overall, I am impressed by this book. Like, this part of the product for sure. I'd give it high ratings. Like, I think there's a lot of neat stuff here. Do I wish it maybe was a little different or did things differently? Sure. But I can't fault the words, and it's all very high quality creation. And yeah, I mean, neat. It's nice to have this in my on my shelf. I want this kind of product on my shelf.
For sure. Well, in our previous section, when we talked about news and our listener emails, we talked about setting a goal and did you meet the goal? A lot of what we talk about is things we wish would have been the goal, but that doesn't take away from the fact that this book set a goal of describing this area in a way that gives game masters and players some fun encounters or some fun playgrounds to play in. And it does that extremely, extremely well.
And
with the next 2 books, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I want to add that setting wise, if I look at this book and compare it to Dragonlance or Spelljammer, this does a better job of answering the critique that has been given of those books, saying, hey, I can't really run a Dragonlance campaign, or you didn't really showcase what a Dragonlance campaign looks like. Or, hey, you gave me some Spelljammer stuff, but like, what I really want to know is how I populate a solar system and how I do ship battles and how do I really make this setting sing. And while I could put more in this book for sure, I would love for it to be twice the size. It is better at doing that than I think other 5e things that have aimed to be a setting, with the exception of Van Richten's and Eberron, and Theros, books like that I think have done a really good job of that. But it's been some time since those books. I think a lot of recent books have not done a great job of that. And so it's nice to see it crank a little more, maybe turn a little more towards that kind of product that does a little better utility towards what a DM wants out of it.
So there you go. Teos has the final word on that, but I have the final word on saying thank you. Thank you to our listeners out there. Thank you to our Master of Dungeons Patreon supporters. We do appreciate everything that you do for us. A special shout out in our show notes goes to our Master of Realms patrons. You are a bunch of wonderful folks here, and I'm looking at your names in our show notes. And to our Masters of the Multiverse patrons, well, you get the special shout out. Graham Ward, James Walton, Joe Tyler, David Somerville from Prismanics.com, Krishna Simose, Andy Shockney, Ross Sandberg, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Robert Paisley, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Falcon Neal, Shawn Molly, The Micro Ant, Eric Mengi, The Mathemagician, Chad Lench, Jim Klingler, aka DM Prime Mover, Brian King, Chad Jackson, Sean Hurst, Paige Lightman, and Ben Heisler, The Mighty Jerd, Nathan Fuller, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon, Seth Eckel, Darren Chandler, DM Chad, Evil John, Merrick Blackman, Steve Bissonette, Craig Bailey, and Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing. Thank you all so much for your support. You, yes, you can become a patron of the show. How do you do that, you may ask? Well, you go to patreon.com/masteringdnd, and you can give us a little bit of your hard-earned money to help us do this thing that we do. And we really do appreciate those folks that help out. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcast or via whatever means you listen to this podcast, or go to YouTube and subscribe. And that will, help us spread the gospel of D&D and of Mastering Dungeons. Teos, where can people find you, and what have you been up to lately?
Find me at alphastream.org. I am celebrating the Forge of Foes being out. If you don't have it, would love for you to get a copy. And I've been releasing Neverwinter videos, and then I'm preparing for my next success in RPGs. What are you up to, Shawn?
I am up to 10,000 things I can't talk about, but I am on the social medias at Shawn Merwin. So if I do drop any hints about what I'm working on, you can find them there. Mastering D&D is also on many of the social media platforms like Twitter and Mastodon and Blue Sky. You can join us via Patreon, of course, and you can leave any comments on our YouTube channel, Mastering Dungeons. So, Teos, we have survived our trip through the Outlands. We've gone through all of the gate towns and come out relatively unscathed. What are we going to do now?
I'm going to roll up a new character called Obvious, and I'm going to go to each of these gate towns and just like go to Bedlam, the super windy place, and be like, woo, windy day today, isn't it? Oh my gosh. It's really blustery, and just really just be a pain in the butt about that.
I'm going to be your sidekick and just roll my eyes the entire time.
Perfect.